Tres personas. ¿Qué hacen? Sí, vale. We are going to start. I introduce the theme and then yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's their problem. So, yeah, please don't. Yeah.
This is in English. You can. Lo que voy a decir en español ahora. Lo digo en español ahora, Iván. ¿Vale? Lo voy a leer yo, sí.
Yeah,
pero en español y se lo he traducido en inglés para que lo tengas cuando quieras, Iván, ¿eh? ¿Ya podemos? Ya estamos en directo. Buenos días a todos y a todas. Como muchos sabéis, soy Montse Ferrer de la Asociación Oikos Ambiental. Antes de iniciar la presentación del primer conferenciante, doy la bienvenida a todos los presentes y la extiendo a todos los que están conectados en el canal, muy especialmente a Casa Capell y a todos sus integrantes y colaboradores. Estas dos conferencias magistrales sobre la radiación electromagnética impartidas por dos extraordinarios y magníficos ponentes que se encuentran presentes en la sala, el profesor Olle Johansson, neurocientífico, y el señor Agustín García Andrés, abogado. Para nuestra asociación es un gran honor presentaros al primer ponente, al destacado neurocientífico, el doctor Olle Johansson, profesor asociado en la Unidad de Dermatología Experimental del Departamento de Neurociencias del Instituto Karolinska en Estocolmo, Suecia. El profesor Olle Johansson es una autoridad líder en el campo del estudio de la radiación de los campos electromagnéticos y los efectos en la salud y el medio ambiente. También trabajó como profesor de neurociencia básica y clínica en el Real Instituto de Tecnología de Estocolmo. El profesor Olle Johansson y su equipo investigan los efectos en la salud debido a los campos electromagnéticos generados por el hombre, artificiales, así como la electrohipersensibilidad como discapacidad funcional. Johansson introdujo el término clínico dermatitis de pantalla para explicar los daños cutáneos que se desarrollaron en la década de los años 70, cuando los trabajadores, primero en su mayoría mujeres, comenzaron a ser colocadas delante de las pantallas del ordenador. Llamó a la acción a lo largo de las líneas de la medicina del trabajo, la biofísica y bioquímica, así como la neurología y la dermatología experimental. El profesor Johansson y sus colaboradores han trabajado además en gran profundidad en áreas tales como enfermedades de la piel, el cáncer, el parto, la incontinencia urinaria femenina, enfermedades de la mucosa oral, el cerebro y la abdominal, la transmisión química, las cuestiones relacionadas con el sistema nervioso periférico y el estudio científico de las sinapsis nerviosas, la función cardíaca, la función del músculo esquelético y su enfermedad y los fenómenos de maduración del tejido conjuntivo. Ha publicado más de 650 artículos originales, revisiones, capítulos, informes de conferencias en el campo de la neurociencia básica y aplicada, de la dermatociencia y sobre efectos en la salud de los campos electromagnéticos. Sus estudios han sido ampliamente reconocidos y recogidos en todos los medios de comunicación, tanto a nivel nacional como internacional, la prensa, la radio, la televisión, etc. Tiene en marcha colaboraciones científicas internacionales, por ejemplo, en Japón, Brasil, Sudáfrica, Serbia, Alemania, el Reino Unido y los Estados Unidos. La presentación del profesor Olle Johansson cubre el fondo histórico de la electricidad y los campos electromagnéticos que sospechas surgieron desde el principio en relación con los campos electromagnéticos y las señales que producen efectos negativos para la salud. Discusión pública global, el tema a los días. También abordará el tema de la electrohipersensibilidad como discapacidad funcional, sus antecesora, la dermatitis de pantalla. ¿Cómo se aborda esta discapacidad funcional, este deterioro de la persona desde el punto de vista del abordaje sueco? La conferencia profundizará acerca de los resultados de las investigaciones científicas sobre los efectos en la salud de los campos electromagnéticos y la urgente necesidad de proyectos de investigación independientes para garantizar nuestra salud independientes de todo lo comercial, puesto que la salud pública no puede tener no puede ser etiquetada. Esta es la responsabilidad del organismo democráticamente elegido de todos los países. El conjunto de evidencias científicas sobre los campos electromagnéticos requiere un nuevo enfoque para la protección de la salud pública, el crecimiento y el desarrollo del feto por fuerzas activas. Con toda esta breve información y sin más dilaciones, tengo el honor y la satisfacción de dar paso al profesor Olle Johansson para que nos presente su ponencia titulada Efectos adversos para la salud de los campos electromagnéticos tales como los WiFi. Profesor Johansson, tenga la amabilidad de iniciar su conferencia.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. It's a great honor to be here today and to visit beautiful and the area around Barcelona. Thoughts and ideas. Before I start, I remind you all the questions and answers will be taken afterwards. It's very important that you do not blindly trust what I say. You have to read for yourself. You have to think again, read more, think more, and then come up with a solution for yourself and for your loved ones regarding health effects of electromagnetic fields. I will start with a short introduction, then I will talk a little bit about the functional impairment or disability that is called electrohypersensitivity. Then I will talk more about scientific results regarding this disability, and then I will move shortly into health effects of electromagnetic fields. Today, there are much more than 25,000 publications that are relevant to this subject. So it's just impossible to cover all the aspects. I will just hand out a few tidbits for you to ponder upon. And also, I will show you the front page of scientific publications, so you don't think that I'm kind of making the stories up. They are real, they are peer-based scientific journals. And just this very year, we have ourselves been granted to come back to in Nature scientific reports. So we have done kind of a journey from the top to the bottom, back to the top. So now it's all in the very finest of scientific saloons. I will then start, if I could find the right one, with the general background. Gentlemen, don't let hard work kill your wife. Let electricity do it. You can read this sign, of course, in two ways, but one way definitely we can rule out. No one wants to hurt anyone. All these electrical or computerized or electronic or digitalized gadgets are here for us to have a better life, an easier life, a much more fun life. But when electricity on a grand scale was introduced into the human society, and that's about 120 years ago, and in the beginning there were very, very few people who had electricity, of course, but more and more so, and maybe we have to admit that we have let loose forces and powers that we cannot control really, or if we should control them, we need to invent tomorrow's green, human-friendly technology. And already at the end of the 1900th century, there were persons that started to claim adverse health effects. And these anecdotal reports, they were reporting hypersensitivity. Tests with so many gadgets was, as far as one can understand, electrohypersensitive. Today, the most famous electrohypersensitive person was Gro Harlem Brundtland, former head of the World Health Organization and former Prime Minister of Norway. A very, very, very intelligent and clever person, and still electrohypersensitive. When it comes to the more general health effects, one has to mention Leaper, who in Denver in with power lines and childhood leukemia. And they found such an association, and the very famous Science paper in 1979 was the start of that particular research area. And that led up to, in 2001, that the World Health Organization cancer classified power frequent magnetic fields, which is a long word for household electricity, and its association. So you already in 2001 had a very important legal step in that way. Then we will move, and we talk a lot about history. I mean, there are so many things in history that are important, but time is shorter. But now we will move into the functional impairment, electrohypersensitivity. You know, functional impairments is the recent word for that that was called disabilities, and before that, handicaps. But nowadays, we are not allowed to say handicaps, and we are not allowed to say any longer. And just to ponder the term functional impairment, you have to remember that every human being, many, many times during his or her life, will be functional, especially children. And for instance, myself, coming here, I immediately, when I arrive at your airport, I become functionally impaired because I cannot speak Spanish. And that is the United Nations definition of functional impairment. That's the definition. And you will be functionally impaired if you go to Sweden because you cannot speak Swedish. So you have that typical definition. And in Sweden, you know, Swedes, as I say, we are very sort of squared, and we do everything very rightly and precisely, and we always listen to what people above us tell us. And the United Nations told us how we should look upon electrohypersensitivity and other functional impairments, and therefore we do as they say. And in Sweden, electrohypersensitivity then is a functional impairment. It is not a disease, very importantly to realize. These persons are not patients, they do not have a diagnosis, we do not treat them apart from their symptoms. If they have a headache, of course, you could go to a doctor and get the headache pill, and of course, if the headache is severe, they can get a sick leave that will be paid by the state. Nothing special with that. But the culprit is still the environment. It's the environment that should be treated if we see like that. And as you see, this is from the year 2000. And at the same year, the Nordic Council of Ministers also classified the symptoms of electrohypersensitivity as an occupationally related symptom-based diagnosis. The reason for that was that at that time, most of the ideas and studies came from occupational work. Today, of course, you will have electrohypersensitivity regardless of where you are, in your home, in the playground, in the school, at work, at a car park, wherever. So today they will need to change this definition a little bit. And therefore, they also have an ICD-10 code, so you can find that together. Today, the recent coding is let's see now, 0090, I think, correct. Now I could check that out. And again, electrohypersensitive people have their own handicap organization, the Swedish Association for the Electrohypersensitive. They are included in the Swedish Federation. They get the governmental subsidy. It's in the order of 1.7 million Swedish crowns. That will equal approximately 200,000 euros. So they get that to drive forward the needs of people with electrohypersensitivity. And in Sweden, as everywhere actually, this is the same in Spain, France, England, wherever you go, all member countries of the UN must adhere in the same way. And the responsibility for functional impairments belong to municipalities. And they follow something that previously was called the UN 22 standard rules and so on. But since 2007, it's upgraded into the the UN Convention on Human Rights for Persons with Functional Impairments. And as you know, from a legal point of view, that's the highest legal level we have on this planet. There is nothing above a convention from the UN. That's the top level, really. And Sweden is on that, and that means it's very simple. You know, you can summarize all these texts, and there are a lot of texts I could tell you from the UN, but you can summarize that into one sentence. Impairment hypersensitivity are entitled to have an equal life in a society based on it. And this goes for everyone. And of course, if you ask yourself here what, for instance, people in society, what their monthly income is compared to your income, you realize that you do not live in an equal society. But we should aim for it, and especially when it comes to functional impairments. And one of the most important principles is the one about complete accessibility. And like in Sweden, and I see the same here, we have a lot of kneeling buses, faced sidewalks, wheelchair ramps, automatic sliding doors, etc., to make all of the public areas fully accessible for people with various impairments. And hopefully it will be done also for electrohypersensitivity more and more and more. In Sweden, we follow then the UN texts, and they only talk about the environment. And that means that no human is in itself impaired. There are instead shortcomings in the environment that cause the measures. And that's also summarized in a Swedish action plan for persons with impairments. 1999/2000, and here it's the Swedish title of it, and it has a very interesting subtitle. It's here, From Patient to Citizen. Before this year, people with functional impairment viewed that, but that is illegal. You cannot do that any longer. Not in Sweden, not in Spain, not anywhere. For instance, when I come to your lovely airport and suddenly cannot speak Spanish, I'm not a patient. I don't have an illness. I am just a functionally impaired Swedish person, a citizen of Sweden. So just remember that. It makes you very simple. And that means that, for instance, to force a person to quit one's employment or to move one's home is a serious legal violation. And in Sweden, the authority responsible for discrimination has said to people with electrohypersensitivity that if they ever feel discriminated in any way, they should file a legal complaint immediately, regardless of what situation or where it is, by whom. Immediately file a legal complaint. And the same goes, of course, for children. You are not allowed to discriminate them from their educational rights or their rights to play, live, and function. Never. So, as you see, electrohypersensitivity and all other functional impairments shall just enjoy their human rights. Nothing more, nothing less. Very simple. But maybe someone of you doesn't agree. Then you can think like this. Just think for a moment. If your loved ones have electrohypersensitivity, what would you then want from your country? And I have said, do not ask what you can do for your country. Ask instead what your country can do for you. But do you see the mistake in that? Shall do for you. It's not a matter of can, it's shall. They have to. And therefore, the UN changed their standard rules to convention. After that, you can file a complaint against your whole country. and send it to the UN and say, hey, I'm functionally impaired, I live in Spain, and I'm discriminated. You have to act upon this. And the interesting thing with conventions from the UN is that they can send fines, economic fines to countries. And now we are talking about hundreds of millions of Swedish crowns. So they are huge amounts of money, and no country wants to end up like that. So you are really, all of you, in a very good situation from a legal point of view. And you need to just step up and make yourself heard and tell your government or your municipality or whatever authority what you need. And they must give it to you. So just be strong. And the interesting thing is, you know, that I meet sometimes civil servants, for instance, in municipalities that go, well, no, this is difficult, you know, I don't know if I could do this, blah, blah. They wouldn't say that if they were themselves affected, or their husbands or wives or children or dogs or goldfishes. Then they would crave for support. It's easy to say no to someone when you're healthy and not impaired. You don't do it if you know what the person is talking about. But just be tough, you know. Then we will talk quickly a little bit about results from science. Very early, I got into this area already at the end of the 1970s and the beginning of the 80s, because in Sweden, it started to come forward, especially with also men that claimed health effects, especially from the skin, when they started to use these new computers that were introduced in offices and different places. And, you know, they would use third ray tubes behind these computer screens. And we started to take skin biopsies to look in a microscope had something happened. And I will just quickly show you some examples. They are all published. Here, for instance, you see a picture from a person with electrohypersensitivity. It's taken in the microscope. It's a small piece of their skin. And what you see here is the uppermost part of the skin, which is called the epidermis. And this is the part that goes a little bit deeper down, called the dermis. And these white cells here, they belong to the immune system. And you have to remember, now we are in the 1980s. I was coming from the central nervous system. I knew a little bit about the brain and spinal cord and things like that, but human skin, not very much. And therefore, I was an amateur. And we had taken pictures like this. We had them on a table. And they were not marked or anything. And into this room came a clinical dermatologist, an expert on human skin and skin diseases, looking at the pictures, immediately saying, you are looking at some patients with a very strong immune reaction. How could you say that? Well, you know, normally you would find single such cells in the human skin. This is a massive activation of the immune system, because these cells are the outermost portion of the immune system. They are looking out to always react to changes in the environment. And you remember, I'm an amateur, really. So what I didn't know was that this is a classical image of a radiation damage, like from X-rays, strong ultraviolet light, or radioactivity. But they were not victims of that. They had just sat in front of the new modern computer screens and still got the very same reaction. And then we made a provocation, an exposure experiment. And you see all the cells after this exposure, they had gone away. And again, being an amateur, I told my collaborators, no. They cannot disappear. Cells don't disappear, you know. You must have done something wrong. So I sent them back to the laboratory to rerun all these steps to produce a new set of images. The result was the same. Had I not been such an amateur, I would have known that in springtime in Sweden, and you know, right now in Sweden, it doesn't look like this. It's very dark, and it's getting much darker for a long, long time. But in the spring, it's again getting lighter outdoors. People run out in lunchtime, and they stand there, oh God, sun, you know, it's a bleak sun on the sky. And then this happens. These cells will react, and they will move into deeper organs like lymph nodes, and they will report that the person, and it will be a fair-skinned Swede, he or she is again out in the sun, and you know, the sun is extremely dangerous radiation source. So the body reacts by sending signals back to the skin, saying, build pigment, build pigment, build pigment. And we will get suntan. And that's actually a nice way, but it's a post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation to protect Swedes against the sun. And we see the same here. And already early in the 80s, it formed in my head that people with electrohypersensitivity, they may be victims of radiation damage, not from the sun, not from radioactivity, not from X-rays, but from non-ionizing radiation, from computer screens, and later on mobile phones, e-readers, and whatever. So that has been our working hypothesis. We also tested for another cell type called the mast cells, and they have nothing to do with telecom masts. It's a German name, actually, of these cells, and they contain substances such as histamine and heparin, and they are the key cell for clinical symptoms such as allergies, asthma, and other oversensitivities. And to make a long story short, these are, again, pictures from, in this case, normal healthy volunteers. These are from electrohypersensitive people, and I don't think you need to be a scientist to realize that there is a strong increase in the number of these white spots, each being a mast cell, and suddenly there is a lot more, oh sorry, it's a lot more, no, it's jumping around. It's a lot more, they are bigger, they shine brighter, and they are more superficial in the skin. And again, this is a textbook image of what you would see from workers being exposed to, for instance, Fukushima and Chernobyl. This is a classical radiation damage from radioactivity. But they have not been exposed to radioactivity. They are just electrohypersensitive people in Sweden. And still, they have the same reaction patterns. And in Sweden, I don't know for Spain, of course, but in Sweden, there has been the last years and decades a dramatic increase in the number of asthmatic and allergic persons and patients. It's the biggest public health issue right now. And if you look on the whole population, it's more than 1/3. And for children up to the age of 14, more than half of them are asthmatic, allergic, and so on. So it's a big, big thing going on. And maybe you have the answer here. It's nothing peculiar. When kids use their mobile phones and tablets and so on, they will be exposed to non-ionizing radiation, and their skin will react in this way. And clinically, they will develop oversensitivities. And it's interesting because this cell type in itself, with its histamine content, can explain all the symptoms that people report being electrohypersensitive. Some physicians say that this is a non-specific reaction. Oh, it's not. It's a very specific reaction, and it's the reaction radiation damage, and it can be explained by mast cells and histamine only. You don't need more than that. So we have suggested that one should do much more research into what we call the mast cell lead or trace or track. So we do hope that people will pick up on this. We have also investigated, if you only look on C and D here, Again, you have the epidermis up here, the dermis. Each dot is a mast cell, as you see. And we have now taken normal healthy volunteers, in this case, dental and medical students, and we put them in front of ordinary household television sets and ordinary household computer screens. We exposed them, and then we looked over time what happened with the mast cells. They should also report symptoms. If you remember, if I go backward, did they get any of the electrohypersensitive symptoms? If so, they should report. No student reported any symptom at all. Some said it was boring to be back 40 centimeters away for 8 hours, but nothing else than that. But still, when you look after 2 hours, the number of mast cells, and this is from the same person, before the start of the exposure, after 2 hours, the number of mast cells has increased quite a lot, as if they would have been visiting Chernobyl or Fukushima. But they have not. They have been sitting in a laboratory in Stockholm, Sweden, with their backs to household television sets and computer screens. And their skin reacts in the same way. All of this is published. So if you want to read more about the details, I could send you publications. Other scientists around the world, like Peter French and Charles Harvey in Australia, they have also investigated how mast cells in cell culture react to the mobile phone signals, the microwave exposures in Australia. And to make a long story short, these mast cells here do not like to be exposed. They react as if they had been exposed to nickel or pollens or something similar. But they were only sort of talking in the mobile phone, and they don't like it. They react in the same way, and they react at the non-thermal level. It's not the heat shock response, which scientifically is very important, because the guidelines that we use for public exposure only take into account thermal effects, and thermal effects that are short. You know, the Spanish protective guidelines, they imply that for mobile telephony, similar wireless gadgets, you can only buy one mobile phone in your life and for 6 minutes. Otherwise, the legal aspects of the guidelines collapse, because they only take 6 minutes once in your life. How real is that? The brain. Sometimes I feel that my fellow men and women, not you, but others, you know, how could you even imagine to mimic a public exposure with a fluid-filled plastic doll that is exposed for at most 6 minutes once in this doll's lifetime? I don't understand that. And therefore, I have been member, I will show it quickly later on, in groups that were urged for biologically based exposure guidelines, which are still lacking. So from that point of view, you are completely naked. But if you're a fluid-filled plastic doll in a laboratory, then it's fine. This very morning, I was contacted by ABC in Australia, and they want to make a science program about these issues. So you see, the whole interest around the planet is very, very big. I'm constantly invited and interviewed and reported about. So it's a very important issue, evidently. I have a colleague in Japan, a very nice man, and he has studied and done a lot of studies, actually. Here he has allowed atopic eczemas, you know, eczemas of the skin. He has exposed them to mobile telephony, and then the eczemas got worse. And he could even follow that in blood samples, because there are markers in blood. The worse eczema, the more of these markers in blood, and the markers are called substance P and vasoactive intestinal polypeptide. And I got very excited, you know, so I called him and said, Hajime, you have to come to Stockholm. We must continue to do more sophisticated studies along these lines, because it's obvious that at least eczemas should not buy and use mobile phones. But Hajime, who is a very kind man, he said, you know, that, no, sorry, I cannot go to Sweden. My boss doesn't allow me and so on, you know. And I was so glad that he didn't, because we didn't have any money. We couldn't pay his air flight ticket. We couldn't pay anything. So it was just a stupid way of me to be excited. And I was glad that he said no, actually, you know. But in a good world, we would have been able to say, you come. You bring your family and relatives and children and dogs and cats and whatever. You just come, because we need your expertise to go to the bottom of this. And, you know, these studies, they are very early. We are at the 80s and 90s. And since then, most of these trails have been stopped. There isn't any development, actually, which I find also odd. Of course, and you know, I'm sorry, this is an old image, as you see. There's a big computer screen here. Now they're much smaller. But you see this person here, and he or she is sitting, working in front of a computer screen, getting these skin problems, feeling a little bit electrohypersensitive maybe. And of course, it could be a matter of electromagnetic fields. We have talked about allergies. There could be light sensitivities. There could be chemical factors in the air. But here also, very importantly, there could be psychological factors. For instance, coping. Maybe it's nothing wrong with the computer. There is no radiation, but it's a bad boss that is pestering the person all the time and stressing him or her. Or maybe there is a personality issue. Maybe this person is scared, you know, and everything is new, and she doesn't really know what to do. I could sort of agree to the whole idea, and that was used in Sweden for quite a number of years to downplay people with electrohypersensitivity. People said that, no, they're just victims of imagination, and they are old, and they have low educations, and they're women, it's a postmenopausal issue, and so on, so on, so on. And the most popular thing to use to explain this, it's actually this man's fault, that you have a mass media-driven psychosis. When he's doing films of me and others, showing them to the general public, then the general public says, maybe I'm a little bit electrohypersensitive too, you know, like that. But it's so easy to solve. And again, I'm so surprised that they were allowed to go around to say this, because to solve it, you just use rats. You know, rats don't listen to this guy. They don't watch his movies. They don't listen to radio or TV. They don't read newspapers. And still, rats are damaged in the very same way as persons with electrohypersensitivity. So there isn't not your fault. It's no mass media-driven psychosis. It's not postmenopausal problems. It's not a matter of education or anything like that. We have done quite a number of studies using rats as experimental animals, and we have the same effects on skin, thyroid, and so on, so on. I could dwell a lot upon that. Well, I will then leave electrohypersensitivity, and I will go to the greater issue, the bigger issue of general health effects of electromagnetic fields on not only human beings, but on all animals, all bacteria, all plants, on everything that is alive here on this planet. Because while we are talking, you know that you're exposed. And if we just look on the third generation mobile telephony, not the second, and not 4G, 3G, and we ask ourselves how much more of that type of radiation today than like for 10 years ago. I would say it's 2 times as much, 3 times as much, 10 times, oh, that's a lot, 10 times more, she says. It's 10 times more radiation. Actually, once there was an old man who said, no, 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 it's much more, it's 100 times. But he was wrong, and you are too, because the answer is a quintillion times more compared to the natural background. And a quintillion is a 1 and 18 zeros. So the exposure you are sitting in right now, and the plants, and the dogs, and the bacteria, and so on, it's just biblical. It's hard to understand from a biophysiological point of view. It's astronomical. But someone has decided that such exposure increases is safe. And unfortunately, as a scientist, you cannot find that. You cannot find the documents that tell you it's safe. Quite the contrary. And therefore, I'm a little bit stressed, to be honest, you know. I get a lot of calls from concerned parents with children in Wi-Fi based schools, from persons that are neurologically disease victims, cancer victims, their relatives, electrohypersensitive people, reporters, journalists, politicians, lawyers, etc. Everyone is calling, trying to understand how all these scientific papers pointing to damage and harm suddenly in the political process could be turned into no harm, turned into safe. It's very enigmatic, to say the least, you know. We can talk a little bit about, and I will concentrate around the precautionary principle, which we are supposed to use in the European Union. And together with lawyer, I even written papers about this, especially one which is very important to read for those that are interested. You know, in Sweden, mobile sweet Sweden is the second richest country in the world per capita person living there. Only Norway is richer. And we have so much money, so we don't even know what to do with all of it, you know. It's the same in Norway. And that is based upon telecommunication. So it has been a very, very nice piece of candy, definitely. But, you know, I love candy, by the way. You know, I love to buy candy. I bought candy yesterday at the train station, actually. You know, so, but you know, when you buy candy and you eat it, and you eat, and you eat, then you watch television or something, and you eat, and then it's a little bit too much. It's a little bit too sweet, and that's the same here. Very early, scientists like myself felt that this piece of candy was a little bit too good to be true. And we started to write commentaries and debate articles. And when I showed this a few weeks ago, then there was a woman in the audience who said, "Who is that?" But it's actually the younger version of me, you know. So, and this is from the the largest tabloid in Sweden called Aftonbladet. It's from September 17, 1995. So you see, it's a long time ago. You were not even born at that time. And I asked in Swedish, how dangerous are mobile phones? And I asked a number of questions, a number of questions here, and they are still unanswered, oddly enough. And now, you know, it has gone quite a number of years. It's 20 years since then, and still we don't know the answers to them. And the editor of this tabloid, he felt that I was kind of boring, typical Swede. So he added this. This is not me, and it's and it's not my car, you know. And it says down here that the 1980s Jappi is dead, but did he die because of that the money ceased to come, or was it because of the dangerous radiation from the mobile phone? And people laughed and said, "Oh, that's so stupid. You cannot die from that kind of radiation." You know, I think this editor, Jan Freemansson, he must have been like a prophet, because later scientists have shown that that is exactly what will happen when, for instance, rats are exposed to mobile radiation at levels that are safe for you. Their lifespan is shortened. In layman terms, they die earlier. So when we laughed, maybe we should have laughed. Maybe it was actually the truth. And 1983, I caught an expression that many other scientists are using, have been using, and I said that this is the largest full-scale experiment ever. What happens when we, 24 hours around the clock, wherever we are, allow ourselves and our to use as guinea pigs, whole body irradiated for the rest of our lives? And I don't get an answer. And I have repeated myself, you know, 92, 98, 2000, blah, blah, 2005, 2008, 11, blah, blah, blah. Now we are at 2015, and I'm still going on with the same question. And no one is answering. No, I'm kidding. People have answered the question. But they have answered it in another way than I thought. If you think that we are all aboard a ship, we're traveling on a ship, and we suddenly realize that a lot of the crew has abandoned ship. Already 10, 15 years ago, the manufacturers of wireless technology have written very clearly that they do not take any form of responsibility for any kind of airplanes. For operators, in Sweden they would be called like Telecommunication or Telia, I don't know for the name here, but operators running the systems, the same. No form of liability or legal responsibility. And they have used, you know, probably thousands of lawyers to write what documents they for license. UK, reassurance in Switzerland, and all other insurance companies in the world, including If Skandia in Sweden, which is so small, you know, they do not take any form of responsibility. They don't assure or reassure for health effects of electromagnetic fields. So they even expand. They don't talk about mobile phones. All electromagnetic fields that are man-made, no responsibility. So they have also abandoned ship. They have answered the question. And in United States and England, so in the English-speaking part of the world, we will say, follow the money. Then you get the answer. And of course, this is a business model. There are no laws saying that manufacturers, operators, or insurance companies must take responsibility. Governments and parliaments. And you know, in industry and in insurance companies and so on, they have a very simple business model, of course. They want to have the profit, but they are glad to give the cost to the society. And that they have done. Furthermore, radiation protection authorities, like in Sweden, they have on their websites instructions and suggestions saying that, well, maybe it's very safe, but to be really safe, maybe you should have short calls and you should use hands-free, put the phone away from you. Again, they are protecting their back, you know, their legal back. And the same goes with the World Health Organization, which is really supposed to take care of you. It's one of the big mothers and fathers, but they do not. They have learned their lesson, like from the vaccine scandal with pandemics. So they do not take any responsibility. And the easiest way not to do it is to say, well, you know, the electromagnetic signals from this gadget given to this baby here, they are cancer classified since the last of May 2011. So if you send your children to schools or homes or playgrounds where they're exposed to microwaves from this kind of gadgets and they get a cancer tumor 30 years later on, it's your problem. Because even the World Health Organization said, this is a potentially carcinogenic exposure. So if you come running and say, hey, we want to have compensation, legal and economic compensation. We told you, can't you read? So you are naked as babies, you know, and you have to hope that future governments and parliaments will help you. And we talked from a legal point of view, it's interesting to see in the United States, they have big, very big law firms, you know, and they are going after various levels of society because they have cancer victims. And previously they were aiming at the manufacturers and operators. They don't any longer. They are aiming for the American state. They are suing the American state instead, you know, because they realize the others have already said no. So when you ask questions, sometimes someone else will answer it for you. And for me, it's very enigmatic that we allow this full time whole body exposure still, when so many have abandoned ship and left us sailing on our own. Some people are not Swedish. You know, Swedes, as I said, they're very nice and so, you know. This is from Northern Ireland. The story here, and that's from March 8, 2003. And you see this one of these gigantic mast constructions, about 250 meters high. They announced from the municipality that they were going to erect such a mast close to school. And the parents said, no, we don't want that. And the municipality said, we don't bother about you, we will build it. And they did build it. And then the parents, they got pissed. So they went and bought a metal saw and just took down the whole mast. And the municipality got an anonymous letter, which is very famous, because it said in English, if you ever erect this mast again, we will kill you. And you know, in Northern Ireland, that means one or two things, the Ulster Union or IRA. So they didn't build it again. That's not the way we do it in Sweden. We sit down and talk and discuss and so on, you know, and have a compromise or whatever. And this is not the way it should be done, of course. But it's interesting to see that parents, they will protect their children, and sometimes at any cost. The most scary thing of it all is actually the genotoxic effect. Namely, that these rays, and this particular paper here is by Henry Lai and Narendra Singh. It's a very prestigious journal, International Journal of Radiation Biology, in 1996, where they showed that both single and double-strand DNA will break when exposed, in this case, to the Bluetooth signal, 2.45 gigahertz, at levels you are supposed to withstand. And this is called genotoxicity. And one has decided, when it comes to food items or pharmaceutical drugs, if they show signs during development of genotoxicity, companies are not allowed to further develop, manufacture, and sell this, because it's a nightmare of Hollywood proportions if a genotoxic effect is let loose in the population. But here it's all right. And this has been replicated and replicated and replicated over and over again. I will show you one such example. This is from the reflex study, which is a gigantic study. And to make it short here, they used the so-called COMET assay, and I will shortly explain it. When you damage DNA, you can look at it using a special electrophoretic equipment. And in a sham exposure, where no damage is taking place, you get a very nice round shape. But if you damage it, for instance, using gamma irradiation, you get the comet tail of small fragments because the molecule, the DNA, has been fragmentized. And here you can see, if you X-ray these cells that were used, 1,600 chest X-rays, and there are no patients that have received 1,600 chest X-rays, of course, but equivalent to that, then you get this image, which oddly enough is the same image you get after 24 hours mobile phone exposure at a SAR level, specific absorption rate of 1.3 watts per kilogram, which is below what is supposed to be safe. When this study was done, do you think that the industry, the telecom industry, went to bizarre length to stop it to be published? Yeah. And they managed for 2 years, but after 2 years, it was published. So it's out in the public domain, you know. And just by trying to stop it, it is in itself telling. If it was wrong, just publish it and replicate it, show it to be wrong. But the telecom industry realized that, Lion Singh, they were right. And all the other scientists, having done similar studies, they were all right. So if I was the Prime Minister of Sweden, for instance, I would say, no, we cannot expose the population, including dogs, plants, bacteria, etc., to something that is so strongly genotoxic. Never, ever. And one should also remember, now we talked about 1.3 watts per kilogram. You see here, that was the exposure for 24 hours. But other scientists have used very, 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 very small exposure levels, very low. And this is actually 100,000 times below the levels you are supposed to withstand. And still people see effects on eating and drinking, calcium fluctuations, DNA effects, e.g. brain effects. You have blood-brain barrier leakages and changes in cell cycle and cell proliferation. And this picture is from 1998. So it's very old. Since then, scientists have added, I don't know how many papers. There are thousands and thousands of them that have been published. And it's a colossal publication rate. I just saw yesterday that from the day before that, I had received 5 more publications. And this morning, it was yet 4 more publications. And for me, reading so slow English, I cannot keep up pace. There are too many publications all the time. I said that few have listened, but apart from the operators, the manufacturers, the insurance companies and so on, here is an example of people listening. And it's the municipality of Benevento outside of Naples in Italy. And they were really upset and said, you should gather the best top scientists in the world from all countries in the world. You should bring them here. We pay for everything. The municipality did this, you know. And a conference was held entitled The Precautionary Electromagnetic Field Approach, Rationale, Legislation, Implementation. So it was a typical conference that you should have attended, actually. I didn't know you at that time, but it was very much about law and legal aspects. And at this conference, and again, you see me here, this is Eileen O'Connor and Bert Chu, and we are starting outside of the conference premises. And it was decided that we should write a resolution, and such resolutions had been written before, but on the internet. And in science, internet is non-existent. We never use that, and things that are on the World Wide Web, they do not exist. They need to be published in a peer-review-based scientific journal. And when we went there and we decided to write a new resolution, I said, this time we must publish it. And the 29 other scientists, professors said, okay, fine, no journal in the world will publish that, you know. So you do it, Olle, you do it, you fix that, you know. It was super easy. There was no problem. And it's published in a very good scientific journal. It's from 2006. And I will not run through all the text here. I will just point out that, for instance, we said we need to put together all of the publications of relevance. In other compilations, people had mostly tried to find papers that didn't show anything. It's like showing pictures of Stockholm, and claiming it's Barcelona. I mean, you cannot do that. But here, people tried to do it in other resolutions and compilations. But I said we need to take pictures from Barcelona if we are going to talk about Barcelona. And in this case, we need to take the relevant scientific papers and we need to compile them. Also, we said that arguments that weak electromagnetic fields cannot affect biological systems do not represent the current spectrum of scientific opinion. And also we said that the precautionary principle needs to be implemented. We must inform the population of potential risks. You remember what I said? Do not trust me. You have to go to all the published information and make up your own mind. I don't want you to change your life and say, well, Olle Johansson from Sweden came here and said we should do this. No, you have to take your own responsibility. But during that process, you should listen to information. But be aware, most of the information, like on the internet, is disinformation. You need to be a little bit smart when you read and ask yourself who has actually published what and for what reason. We should limit cell phone and cordless phone use by young children and teenagers, and we should ban telecom companies from marketing to them. 15, thank you. That's perfect. You know, when you ask for something, like in Sweden, people would say, oh, let's have a party. And no one steps forward and says, I will help you. But the person who said it must do it. And it's the same here. I thought that a lot of people would step forward and help us, but they didn't. So we had to sit down and we worked for 9 months. And we didn't have any resources. We couldn't even buy a pencil. We had nothing. We had to work in evenings, in weekends, holidays, and stuff like that. After 9 months, I said, no, we cannot continue any longer. But then we had already 2,000 scientific papers compiled on 600 pages. And it formed the bioinitiative report that was launched the last of August 2007. It's called the Rationale for a Biologically Based Public Exposure Standard for Electromagnetic Fields of ELF and RF character. 600 pages, you cannot publish in any journal. There are no journals that would accept that. So this was initially published on the internet. But later on, parts of it has been formally published in a journal called Pathophysiology, 2009, including my own chapter from here. 600 pages. Now we're talking Dostoevsky, if you have read this Russian author. Now we're talking thick things, you know, hard texts. I didn't think anyone would ever read it. But see, the European Parliament read it. And September 4, 2008, they concluded that the limits on exposure to electromagnetic fields which have been set for the general public are obsolete. And they need to be changed because they cannot protect the general public. You know, I was flabbergasted. Jesus, they have read it, they have understood all the details, and they're acting upon it. And I felt, now we are really in business. And I waited at my telephone that the European Union Parliament would call me, you know. But they didn't, because the industry stepped forward and said, this is very true, this is right. We need to reinvestigate these exposure guidelines. But these fuckers forming the bioinitiative working group, they cannot do it, but we, the industry, will do it. And so they did, and they had the conclusion that nothing needed to be changed. Surprise, surprise. So that was the final outcome. Very quickly, I remember when the bioinitiative report was launched August 31st, the day after I came to my job, September the 1st, there were already 3 new papers in my computer that day that should have been in this. So therefore, the bioinitiative report has been updated 2012 and 2014, and now it's in the order of 5,000 references and approximately 2,000 pages. So it's thicker and thicker. And among such papers are effects on male sperm cells. They don't like to be exposed to mobile phones and so on. The same goes for female egg cells, by the way. You have very dramatic effects on fertility, ending in irreversible infertility. If we translate that to Mataro, it can mean that young men and women in about 150 to 200 years' time cannot get babies at all because of something you did 2015. It's a little bit too late to call back and say, hey, please, could you stop that exposure because it has a transgenic, epigenetic effect that will show itself in 5 generations. So think. Here is an effect on as well as newly born babies. They get stressed. It is more shallow. Ask parents, I guess a few of you are parents here, if they want to have stressed newlyborns or fetuses. No one says, oh yes, that's exactly what I as a father or mother want to. Everyone says, no, no. But that is what's happening when you expose them to mobile telephony. Very important study, tomato plants in France. They do not like to be exposed to base station exposure from the antennas. And they react with a sequence of damaged molecules. And I quote the French scientists who said, it is exactly as if we would crush them with a hammer. But they didn't touch them. They just exposed them to the base station radiation you are sitting in now. And therefore, when I walk around in your beautiful park, I feel ashamed. Do we really know what these plants are going through right now? Maybe we don't, you know. Retarded learning, studied on rats, including both decrease in concentration capacity and decrease in short-term memory. It has been replicated in human beings. Here are young males that did less good in the linguistic test in school when they were double-blindly exposed to mobile telephony radiation. So all these tablets and mobile phones and computers, from that point of view, dumbs you down. I don't know for Spain, but in Sweden, it's very obvious. You know, Sweden is the most computerized school country in the world. Pupils often have like 3, 4, 5 computers of different types, and they use them constantly. And in the recent so-called PISA tests, the Swedish pupils have plummeted in their learning capabilities, like mathematical understanding, language understanding, and also, oddly enough, in IT knowledge and computer handling, Swedish kids are getting dumber and dumber as well. Maybe it's not the same here, but in Sweden, it's a very clear-cut effect. So you can really question the pedagogic value and as well as the radiation effects here. And these studies, by the way, are very elegant, very smart. And particularly this one, again, the big Professor Henry Lai from University of Washington in Seattle, United States. He did this already in 1994, where he looked at rats. So, very smart. Well, I'm coming to the end. In November 2009, we felt that the bioinitiative report was a little bit thick, to be honest, you know. 600 pages and later on 2,000 pages, that's a lot. So we decided that we should sit down again, and we met in Norway, in Seletun, outside of Bergen, and we concluded that low-intensity, non-thermal bioeffects and adverse health effects are demonstrated at levels significantly below existing standards. The official public safety limits, here in Spain you use this one, are inadequate and obsolete with respect to prolonged low-intensity exposures. This is the one I talked about. One call in your life, at most 6 minutes, never ever again. And you need to be a fluid-filled plastic doll as well. So this is what Spain uses. And new biologically based public exposure standards are urgently needed to protect public health worldwide. And it's not in the public interest to wait. That was 2010. And then what? What happened after that? Well, in 2011, May 6, the Council of Europe said, based upon the Silicon report, and the Silicon report, by the way, it's just 8-9 pages. So it's very short. So if you want to read just one paper, I would recommend that one. They said that you should ban mobile phones and wireless networks in schools altogether. And that was exactly what we had suggested too. May 31st, 2011, the World Health Organization and their cancer organ, which is called the International Association for Research on Cancer, classifies radiofrequency electromagnetic fields as possibly carcinogenic. And remember that when they do that, and 2001, they did the same for household electricity, power frequent magnetic fields, and childhood leukemia, they could have put it in class 4 if they thought it was safe, because they have a class 4 for proven non-carcinogenic exposures and substances. But they didn't. And I believe strongly it is because they can be questioned legally. You know, they are a United Nations organ, and they could be put in front of the UN if they do something wrong. And then it's better to say, well, it's possibly carcinogenic, leaving the responsibility to you. You have to decide. It's up to you. And if you get damaged or lose your health or get a cancer tumor, or your children get a tumor, whatever, well, that's your problem. We told you it could be. So they have really protected their backs. 2012, October 12, the Italian Supreme Court, the highest legal level in Italy, rules that a mobile phone to cause cancer in a patient. It cannot be overruled. So it stands there. That's the decision. And I don't know in Italy how much economic compensation people get. In Sweden, you know, they get a few thousand euros at most, not much at all, you know. But of course, behind this, you have United States. And when we met at your office, we talked about the claims that they have in United States already. They are aiming for 100 billion US dollars per case. 100 billion US dollars per case. So the American state, already being bankrupt, they need to take care here, you know, because if a lawyer would win, Jesus Christ, that would be a precedent that would really echo throughout the world. So that's what they are doing. January 29, 2015, France adopts a law about wireless systems in schools. France are actually very tough on this. And also in France, and you know, in France, it's not easy to be disabled. It's very tough, actually. They don't do very much for people with various functional impairments. But this year, 2015, a lady who I've helped for 3.5 years, she got the legal and economic compensation from the French authority because of her electrohypersensitivity. So she gets a monthly allowance due to this. Quite unique in the world, I would say. So things are changing. And now it's October 2015, Catalonia. Maybe the answer is, maybe the answer is to my question before, no more full-scale experimentation. Maybe we need to have a moratorium to stop and say, let's do something. Let's investigate more. And with all the publications, I wouldn't do much more science, actually. I would rather look for developing what I call tomorrow's human-friendly techniques and methodologies. So we don't harm each other. And hopefully you will do it. And hopefully in the future, all mobile phones and tablets and so on will be Spanish or Catalonian. So you will develop a new technique here. Finally, do not ever believe that mobile phones and wireless internet and so on are safe. They are not. They interfere with normal brain function, learning and memory, fertility, cancer risks, and be shown to shatter the DNA in cells. All of this can be found in peer-review-based scientific journals, but until now has not been in the public domain. So I leave really with you to think and think again and think a third time and come up with tomorrow's green human-friendly technology and to save the world. But before doing that, I would just end to talk quickly about safety. How should you arrive at this human-friendly technology? How should you think? And you remember that here in Spain, you have this recommendation for exposure. It's 9 million microwatts per square meter. And other official bodies, other reports like the Bioeffects report, the Celiton statement, private persons, more Bioeffects report and so on, they have suggested that the public exposure should be stepwise lowered. It's still here for Spain. This is the recommendation. And to the best of my knowledge, there's only one hygienic safety level ever proposed. And that's from 1997. And this is the natural background. And if you take these figures and divide by this, then you get 1 quintillion times difference. So this is the natural background during which all of life on the planet has been developed. But since a few years back, bam, we put on antennas, base stations and so on, and suddenly we expose people, dogs, cats, plants, bacteria, whatever, insects, at astronomically biblical levels. And the question is, of course, how could that ever be safe? When I presented this at the trade union office in Stockholm in 1997, in that room, one of my toughest opponents was present, a man. And he said the following: normally, I never trust Olle Johansson, but this time he is completely right. So even he said, 1997, this is the only way to achieve safety. But you are supposed to be safe up here. Thank you so much for attending. You know, before we go on, I will tell you a secret. When I sat by my computer back in Stockholm, I tried to, the computer refused. It was just possible, but actually behind this flag, there is a Spanish flag, but I couldn't get it at the same time. So I'm sorry if someone doesn't believe in this flag, you know, so, but you have to live with that. So, thank you. Break, yes, thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And good luck now. No, 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 no.